text, Matthew 27, verse 24 to 26. When the narrative of the gospel reaches this moment, the scene is set before the Roman governor, Pontius Pilate. The religious leaders of Israel have delivered Jesus to the Roman authority, and the crowd stands waiting for judgment. The Passover custom allowed a prisoner to be released, yet the multitude demanded the release of Barabbas, a rebel and murderer, while insisting that Jesus be crucified. Matthew writes, open quote, "When Pilate saw that he could prevail nothing, but that rather a tumult was made, he took water and washed his hands before the multitude, saying, 'I am innocent of the blood of this just person. See ye to it.' Then answered all the people, and said, 'His blood be on us and on our children.' Then released he Barabbas unto them. And when he had scourged Jesus, he delivered him to be crucified." Close quote. This passage stands at the turning point of the gospel narrative. Here, the Messiah is formally handed over to death, and the responsibility for that act is openly declared. The governor's declaration. Pilate's actions reveal both political weakness and reluctant recognition of Jesus' innocence. Matthew records Pilate referring to Jesus as this just person. The governor perceived that the charges against him were not rooted in true criminal guilt, but in the envy and hostility of the leaders. Yet Pilate did not exercise justice. Instead, he attempted a symbolic act. He washed his hands before the crowd. In the ancient world, the washing of hands could signify the removal of responsibility. By doing this publicly, Pilate declared that the decision was not his own, but that of the people standing before him. However, Matthew's narrative shows that earthly authority cannot remove itself from the unfolding plan of God. Though Pilate attempted to distance himself from the verdict, the crucifixion of Jesus proceeded according to divine purpose already revealed in the scriptures. The voice of the crowd. The crowd's response is striking. They cry out, "His blood be on us and on our children." These words demonstrate the intensity of their rejection of Jesus as the Messiah. They persuaded the people that this man from Nazareth was not the king promised to Israel, but a threat to their religious order. In this declaration, the nation assumes responsibility for the shedding of innocent blood. Throughout Israel's history, the prophets warned about the consequences of rejecting the righteous and persecuting those sent by God. Matthew's gospel repeatedly presents Jesus as the culmination of that prophetic pattern. Earlier in the book, Jesus spoke of the blood of the righteous that had been shed from Abel onward, describing a generation that would fill up the measure of their fathers. The words of the crowd now echo that theme. The rejection of the Messiah becomes the climax of Israel's long history of resisting those whom God sent. The exchange of prisoners, the release of Barabbas, forms a powerful contrast in the narrative. Barabbas was known as a rebel and a murderer. He represented the violence and insurrection that characterized many movements within first-century Judea under Roman rule. Yet the crowd chose Barabbas over Jesus. In this exchange, the innocent one is condemned, while the guilty one is set free. The guilty prisoner walks away from judgment, while the righteous man is led to scourging and crucifixion. Matthew places this contrast deliberately before the reader. The story illustrates the nature of what was about to occur. The one who had committed no sin was treated as though he were the criminal, while the criminal was released. This moment foreshadows the meaning of the cross that follows. The scourging and delivery. Matthew briefly states that Jesus was scourged and then delivered to be crucified. Roman scourging was a brutal punishment carried out with a whip designed to tear the flesh. It often preceded crucifixion and weakened the condemned person before the execution. The gospel writer does not dwell on the physical description. Instead, the focus remains on the unfolding fulfillment of what had long been promised through the prophets. The suffering of the righteous servant had been spoken of centuries earlier, describing one who would bear the iniquities of others and be numbered with transgressors. Here, before the crucifixion even begins, Jesus is already being treated as though he were the guilty one. The righteous one, condemned Matthew, consistently presents Jesus as the righteous king promised in the Hebrew Scriptures. From his birth narrative to his teaching and miracles, the gospel reveals a man who embodies the righteousness required by the law and the prophets. Pilate's declaration, "This just person," unintentionally affirms that reality. Even the Roman governor recognizes the innocence of the one standing before him. Yet the righteous king is rejected by his own people and handed over to the Gentile authority for execution. This rejection fulfills the pattern described throughout the prophetic writings, where the chosen stone becomes the stone rejected by the builders. The purpose behind the rejection. Though the actions of the leaders, the crowd, and the governor appear chaotic and unjust, Matthew's gospel presents them as part of a larger redemptive design. The Messiah came not merely to teach or to reign, but to give his life. His death was not an accident of political tension, but the culmination of God's plan to deal with sin and establish a new covenant reality. The narrative emphasizes substitution. The guilty man is released. The innocent one is condemned. The punishment falls upon the righteous, while the criminal goes free. In this exchange, the meaning of the coming cross begins to emerge. The one who had done no wrong stands in the place of the guilty. The turning point of the story. Matthew 27:24-26 marks the moment when Jesus is formally handed over to death. The decision has been made, the crowd has spoken, and the Roman authority has delivered the sentence. From this point forward, the narrative moves toward Golgotha. The rejection by the nation, the symbolic washing of hands by the governor, the release of the criminal, and the condemnation of the righteous Messiah all converge in this passage. These events prepare the reader for the climactic act that follows, the crucifixion of Jesus, where the righteous king bears the judgment that others deserved. Thus, this brief but powerful section of Matthew's gospel reveals the profound contrast at the heart of the story. The innocent condemned, the guilty released, and the Messiah delivered to the cross.